you know that I have been waiting for this show so long. Fatima, we have Fatima Ashgar here who did Brown Girls, and I have talked about your show no less than 5-6 times on previous Zacuto Live shows.
Yeah, it's a great example.
It is. People keep saying, they say stuff and I'm like, but Brown Girls. And they say stuff and I say, but Brown Girls. We get a lot of people on our show that are indie filmmakers, and your situation is a little different because you're really more of a poet, a writer, a philosopher, an educator, now a filmmaker, a creator, and a episodic television writer. But we're filmmakers and businessmen, and we're going to take this from a different point of view. The reason that we always talk about your show is because when we talk to people, we say, you know, there's sort of the perfect storm of marketability here, and you created that. What you did was you picked a topic that is not really Hollywood isn't really doing right now. You did it well. That's step one. You got to do it well. And, you know, in this world where we're getting all these people that are like complaining, oh, they're not doing this and they're not making that and this actor's not being in this, you kind of just said, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to just make it, and I'm going to go around Hollywood and I'm just going to do it. And that's the part that's impressed me. You just did it. And you should really be proud of that because we're proud of you for doing that. Okay, so who is Fatima Ashgar?
I'm a writer and an artist, and I think that that's really kind of the approach that I had in terms of making Brown Girls. You know, a lot of times people will say like, well, this was your first time doing this, or how did you do it? And really, I think the kind of mentality that I have towards a lot of stuff is just being like, I'm an artist and I have these stories that I want to tell, and then what's the best vessel of telling that story, right? And so in the past, I've done projects that center around photography, poetry, things that are more narrative, things that are more visual based. For me, I think thinking about not really holding tight to genre or like these kind of like labels or definitions, but just allowing myself the freedom and flexibility to do whatever I feel like is important to do in that moment.
Okay, so let's move on to a little bit about what Brown Girls is. And I want to play this clip so that people can kind of get a flavor for it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about character, conflict, and transformation, which is what we always talk about.
First one, you gotta stop eating dirty butt. Oh my God, that should have been the real intervention.
No,
Dirty butt.
it was a mistake, okay? And like, y'all please, just get over it. It's done.
Do you still have pink eye? Leila? Escúchame, te estoy hablando.
Come on, Leila, you can do this.
Shy sometimes, a little quiet, but I'm working on it. A little fire inside, you could say, but I'm working on it. And I'ma need 4 or 5 every time I be counting on it. Make a move some days, hit your snooze, but we working on it. And then you call me. Say love, they don't mean us. But love like ours don't need no laws.
I'm not even gonna begin to give you a lecture about what you don't know about feminism.
Is this supposed to be Ruti?
Jason and I fucked 2 days ago, but he didn't take me out before, so there's that.
He's probably gonna make me suck his dick or something. And like right after his show is the worst time because like his pants are so tight, and so he takes them off and it just like wafted in, and I'm like already gagging.
Single Girls Club forever. Single Girls Club forever.
Maybe you could, maybe you could.
straight away. First thing, you know what I'm going to say here. I make a comment always that every single thing in your program needs to relate to the central focus of your concept. The section where
the faces?
The faces, where they're changing different colors. I love that. I like the end titles, how you use the brown color, just all of it. I like the type font. All these things are so important. But the story, okay, so the story centers around a friend group, a three-person friend group, and one of the, I'm just going to tell the viewers so that they know, Layla's story is basically coming to terms, well, she's coming out, so her story is about coming out to me, and Patricia's story is sort of like, I'm kind of lost, I don't know what to do. And when I look at this, I see this as a coming-of-age story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a coming-of-age story. I think that for me, what was really important was that this is a story about friendship, right? It's a story about particularly Layla and Patricia, but also Vic and their kind of bonds that really unite them, and the ways that they ride out for each other, right? And that they like co-sign each other's bullshit as friends do, and they also inspire each other to be better. And a lot of it is that kind of period of right when you graduate college and you don't know how to define success or what it kind of means to be a person in the world. And so to me, a lot of their storylines are just really about that they're about kind of like fledgling and being on your own for the first time and navigating what it means to be single or to be committed to someone, and to kind of have relationships that are serious for the first time, or be single and be on your own for the first time. And so all of them kind of really in the web series really follow that and deal with that. And these are characters, and characters are people. And it's really like a lot of times people would just be like, oh, well, Layla's Muslim and South Asian and queer, and like be really fascinated by that. And I was like, well, that's not really that. I don't know. It's not like I'm trying to say anything about like identity. What I'm trying to do is be like, this is a character, right? This is a person that exists, and this is something that they're going through. What I wanted was to tell a story of friendship and to not turn it into kind of an issue-based show. And so to me, what was just really important was to think about all of these people as human and relatable, and dealing with loneliness and relationships in the way that all of us kind of deal with loneliness and relationships.
I 100% agree with you. When I look at story, I don't see it in LGBTQ plus ways. I see it in story. When I look at your story, I don't even see the brown girls part of it. I know that's kind of weird because I only look at story.
Right. I think what makes it a success is that everybody can relate to it. I mean, because everybody has these issues that you're presenting in the show. It really doesn't matter almost like what color they are, or what gender identity, or any of that, because these stories are what everybody goes through.
Yeah, it's universal. Yeah, and the beautiful part is you're going to have a crossover audience, and you cannot beat that. Speaking to the other point that you mentioned, have you ever seen the movie The Graduate?
No.
Oh my God, you got to watch that, because you literally said the log line for The Graduate, because really it's about Benjamin, who gets out of college and doesn't know what he wants to do. Patricia wants to be a musician, but she doesn't know how to get there. This story has been told, all stories have been told a million times, but you told it well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think too for us, like we just kind of treated our characters like they were real, and that that they, all of their identities, while they inform everything that they do, right? So the characters do talk about race, and they do talk about, there's that moment in the web series where Patricia gets fired and she's like, well, it's racism. And then Layla and Vic are kind of like, is it racism, or did you make a scene at your, thing? And I think to us, like, for, Sam Bailey, my director, and I talked about this for a really long time, but when I wrote Brown Girls, in the notes was that all of the characters who were speaking were played by people of color, right? And that was because I came from a theater background, and what I saw was often characters that you even thought were like very clearly coded as people of color, productions would just like make them white. Like there was a example of this like show that was about like Martin Luther King and Martin Luther King Jr. and it was like put on by a high school or something, and they cast a white person to play Martin Luther King Jr. And it was this wild thing of like, wait, how could you do that? You know, and working in theater and seeing the amount of kind of racism that exists and both in front of the camera or in front of the stage and behind was very real to me. And so what was important to us was that we both in front of the camera and behind the camera really reflected our communities that don't often get the opportunities to make this kind of work. And so what we really wanted was to say, like, you know, like I was a first time writer in terms of TV and web series and all of that. Like if I had gone and I had pitched it to people and I had said, this is what it is, and I was a first time writer and I'd never written anything, people might not have given me money or funded it. Right. And so, and Sam, this was her first time directing something that wasn't something she had written. Right. And so we all were kind of doing these firsts. And I think that was really important because it was our ability to just kind of be like, we don't really care what the rules are, being able to prove that we can do something. What we care about is trying and seeing where we can go from there.
It goes back to what you said, a poet is making it, creating it, and you did that. And that's the lesson that everybody needs to see here. There is a lot of complaining going on, and is Hollywood biased? Yes, they are. But that didn't matter to her.
No, there are ways to get around it and to end up changing it.
You just did it. That's right. You just did it. And it was interesting what you said. My favorite line in the entire series is when Layla looks at, they're all sitting on the couch at the intervention, and she looks at the other person and she's like, what are you talking about? I'm racist to you. Or my family's racist to you. It was beautiful. I love that.
Hey guys, I'm gonna jump in a little bit here. We got a couple questions. Hi everybody, I'm Rachel. I'm who you're talking to in the chat. So we've got some questions from Scott about putting your team together and money. And I actually was curious about how you and Sam like found each other and how you work together as a writer director. So we'd love to hear about how you put your team together and how you sort of built money and whether your web series was making money and some of sort of the financial nitty gritty, if you're okay getting into it.
Yeah, our web series made no money. So we basically applied. So when I first had the draft of the entire script, I did coming from theater and a background of theater, I did a staged reading of it, and I invited people whose opinions I respected. So Sam was a good friend of mine, and I knew that she had done You're So Talented, which is a web series that she created on her own and starred in and wrote and directed. And so I invited Sam, I invited a bunch of people, and right after the reading, Sam came up to me and was like, I want to direct this. Like, I really would love to direct it. And I was such a fan of Sam's work, as well as knew her as a really good person and friend. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. The script was in a place where we could have gone into pre-production right then. And so we did. I did maybe like another draft, tweaking some certain things on the script, but it was pretty close. And then we, coming from a theater background, both Sam and I came from theater backgrounds, we were able to kind of cast out the series. And then Sam, having worked in film, knew a lot of people, but also was really intentional about wanting to make sure that people behind the camera were queer and people of color and women, and hopefully from intersections of a lot of that. And so it was Sam's first time working with our DP, Hannah. And that was a really, really fruitful relationship. We pulled in a lot of friends. So Jamila is my best friend. Jamila Woods is my best friend, and we pulled her in for a lot of her music for the series. Our budget was $20,000. I'm trying to remember the exact breakdown, but I think we applied for a grant and got $12,000 from a grant. We got $1,000 from Open TV, and the rest we crowdsourced. So about $7,000 we crowdsourced through like a GoFundMe type thing. And that was how we made our 20. And it was a thing in which we didn't have a marketing budget, and we didn't have an event budget, and we didn't have a lot of stuff. And so we kind of, when we would get to those moments, we were like, oh shit, we don't have money, or we don't have this thing. And so we would, barter with the venues, and we would, pay out of pocket. whatever Sam and I kind of had to make it go. So it was really a labor of love. And I think everyone who worked on set got paid, with the exception of Sam and I. So I think it was a thing where it was like Sam and I didn't and everyone else did, because it was important to us knowing the makeup of our cast and crew that we were able to pay people. And even if it was a symbolic pay, like it's not that it wasn't their rates or anything, but just to be able to honor their work in whatever way we could.
I have a quick question. In the HBO version now, are you going to be using the same actresses?
That's a conversation that we haven't had yet. And so part of the thing I think about a development deal, which I didn't understand until I, started working on this, is a development deal is a chance to develop the pilot and the story and the season arcs. But it's not a guaranteed you're going to air, and it's not a guarantee that they're going to shoot your pilot. And so what it is it means that they're investing in you, but it doesn't mean that, like, a lot of people will always be like, well, when's it coming out? And I'm like, well, we don't know yet because we're in development. And so a lot of times projects get squashed in development, and you can kind of look at, or they get moved. So you can look at any kind of example. If we're looking at some of the examples of web to series, right? Like Issa Rae was in development with Shonda Rhimes and ABC, and that show got squashed. And then she moved to HBO and was in development for 2.5 years before HBO committed to making the show. Development is a really different beast when you go from indie work to network work.
I hope they don't mess with your casting, because that's spot on. I mean, that chemistry between them is what really makes that show, I think, too.
It did.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things. First off, welcome to TV. That's what TV is. There is no guarantee. That's why I hate it. But then again, don't fret about that. There's always, your show's gonna happen because it's relevant. It may not happen there, it may not happen here or where, but there is an audience for your show. And I always say, where there's people, there's money. How did HBO, did you contact them or did they contact you?
When we dropped our trailer, we had a lot of people who reached out to us just to kind of meet with us. So HBO reached out to us then when the trailer dropped. And as did a few other places that we were just like, why are these people trying to talk to us? And in honesty, when I wrote this and when Sam and I made this, there was never a moment where I considered Hollywood or when I considered network. It just wasn't a thing that I was thinking about, and I think coming from a poetry background, I was like, well, this is my community and I'm making for my community. And my world was very small. It was it was just thinking that was it. And so when we started kind of getting these initial emails from folks in Hollywood and production companies, they were like, well, when can we meet? And we were like, well, we don't live in LA. We're not going to meet, and then we were like, wait a minute, I think we should go to LA and just see. And so we went to LA and we both met with managers and signed on with management companies. And then in probably January of 2017, we were in post-production, we were in rollout. It was very much like, okay, we got to get this out. We got to get this out. And our managers were like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to need you all to start developing this pitch. And so on top of like just the rollout of the web series, we started doing that. And then we flew out again in March and we pitched. So we pitched to like pretty much most of the streaming services and stuff. And we didn't expect HBO to want it. And it was really surprising when they did. And we were super excited about it. And so it was kind of a thing where what happened was Sam and I didn't reach out to anyone. A lot of the way that we kind of worked was just email interests that people were kind of hitting us up on, and then mutual friends of friends who maybe knew people. So like I had a friend who works in media, and when my friend found out that I was meeting different managers, was like, hey, I have a friend manager that you should meet over at 3 Arts named Jermaine Johnson, and he became my manager.
So can we, for our filmmaking audience, Fatima, can you tell us a little bit more about like your filmmaking techniques and choices and, the look of it and all that? How much of it was based on your budget or, your creative choices?
I wrote this series, and when we found out our budget, it was under what we thought it was going to be. We wanted a bigger budget, and by at least $10,000, and we couldn't get that. And so I did a rewrite pass that put it all more in one location. and we used, our DP's apartment at the time, and so most of it was shot in one location that we didn't have to pay for because we were using our DP's apartment. And so there's kind of a way in which we really, budget was a constraint. It was a huge constraint. We didn't have rehearsal time. We shot in 8 days, we did it really, really fast. And that was just the limitations of what we had, and then, Sam is a really amazing director and can make a lot work with, made a lot work with very little. And there was moments where Sam and I met and we talked about the look of the show and what we wanted. And I was kind of explaining that I really love, like Bollywood and these kind of the colors that Bollywood uses, as well as this approach to wide shot, right? Like Bollywood is really, really good at like thinking about a kind of like wide angle and a above angle. And so some of the ways that that Sam shot was a combination of thinking about like the kind of real grittiness of Chicago and an approach to that, coupled with a Bollywood aesthetic, a Bollywood lens, which is why the show is so unique and shot that way. And then also it's like, Sam has her own filmmaking influences in terms of directing. The two kind of lead collaborators at this table were me and Sam. It was the two of us, and we were in sync the whole time about what we were kind of doing. It's really great to work with your friends because you kind of have a trust, and art making, like you fight, there's like moments where you're like, wait, what? No, I don't like that. Or, there's so much that happens. But the thing is, if you have a solid base of trust, you can do it. And so, Sam and I, we always look out for each other, and we always have each other's backs. And we kind of joke about this because we're like, we say this a lot where it's like, we're like, people don't expect us to have each other's backs that much, but we do. And we're always in communication. We're always talking. And so that kind of level of trust and communication was like very integral in terms of not only making the web series, but also navigating a deal, navigating what a deal looked like and navigating the development process.
Unbelievable. How many words did she say in there are things that we talk about? Collaboration. This is a lost art with young filmmakers. Everything relating to the theme of the show, the gritty nature, the Bollywood nature. I picked up on a lot of that, and it really, like the Chicago-ness, even in Shameless, it's got that grit to it. I loved that.
But the thing that we always say is a lot of times when you have very limited resources, you have to be, you're forced to be creative.
More creative.
And more creative, and that comes through. If you had everything in the world, you're almost lost, you know what I mean? We always had to figure things out, and a lot of times you'd get these gems from that.
I agree with you. Jens and I have worked together as director DP for 35 years. So you guys, for a first project, did this in a Hollywood craft system way. That's what we call it. And the one thing that we tell young filmmakers is, when you shoot, edit, do everything yourself, you are missing out on every other person who has ideas that can bring it to that. And often we've talked about how well the characters related to each other felt real, like they knew each other. You watch the first season of Seinfeld, and it's horrible. You're like, none of these characters, it felt like, we have often talked about, we want to shoot a TV pilot, shoot an entire first season, throw it away, and then do the next one, because the characters now understand each other, and they are who they are. I felt like, I don't know how you did this, I don't know if they're actual friends, but I felt like Layla and Patricia were actual friends. Did they know each other?
The actors met the day before.
That's unbelievable.
Because remember what we tried is we tried to get our cast together well before and rehearse many times just so they can kind of get us some familiarity.
Exactly.
Which worked to some extent too. But there's got to be, sometimes there's just a magic chemistry that
Yeah.
ends up being there, and you got to be a good casting agent for that.
Your director, thumbs up. Yep. Okay, Rachel, we're on you.
First question, I don't want to put you on the spot. This might be more Sam's department, but do you know what camera you used to shoot the web series?
No, I don't. Sorry. Yeah, that's
fair enough.
I knew that was coming up.
I don't know many writers who would know that either. But I just want to jump back a little bit to something you were saying. We had a question here from TJ about where your trailer was in order to be seen by all of these people. So you said that when the trailer went up and then you started getting contact from people. So where did the trailer go up? Where did you put it, and how did you promote it?
We just put it on Vimeo. I know that that's like the worst answer, but we really were super grassroots about how we did this. We put it on Vimeo. I put a Facebook status on my thing that was like, hey, do I know any journalist friends who would write for this? And the first blog to cover our trailer is a very small blog called Black Nerd Problems, who we adore and is like, we stand for. But they were the first people to break our trailer. They were like, here's the trailer for Brown Girls, and it just caught kind of fire. And what we noticed was that we dropped stuff, and it was all on these very small local blogs, mostly of people that were writers that we knew, that we were in community with, that were just like, hey, here's this trailer, or here's this new thing. We don't really know what it is, but we see it and we're gonna share it. And from that, it reached tier after tier after tier, to the point where by the time the season dropped, we had people from Time reaching out to us, wanting to do interviews with us, and people from W Magazine and Elle. And so it was a thing, but that was very much a grassroots push. And that really came from people seeing it on social media and getting excited about it, right? And to me, what it spoke to was just a hunger, was that there really aren't enough stories of people of color and of queer people. There's just not. And so when folks saw something and they were like, this could potentially be something that looks like me and my friend group, people got really, really excited about it, and I think that that's just what that was a huge thing, was seeing people feel like they were just, for their whole lives, were overlooked, and I felt that way. And so I think a lot of our kind of initial response was really around that.
All right, Fatim, I'm going to disagree with one thing you said, because we comb the web looking for stuff, and HBO and all these people are combing the web looking for stuff. And there are other people that are doing LGBTQ plus content. What's different about yours is that it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and the crossover, I think, is
yes,
much a broad appeal there.
People are looking for good. There's a lot of content out there, okay, but there's not a lot of good content. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing I can do for our community to say it's got to be good. It's just, we talked about this in the one film we made. Mm-hmm. There is no magic bullet. There is no magic pill. It just, good is good, mm-hmm. And also, yours is good.
As a creator and as an artist, you can make something good and then make something really bad, right? I think that there's a way that when folks, when you're really thinking about art and you're really thinking about the process of, there are no shortcuts to that. Just because you've done something once, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easier. Every single time I write a poem, I'm like, fuck, I don't remember how to write a poem. It's the feeling of that anxiety and having to grapple with it. And I think that there's a lot of duds. I think that there's a way that you have to make stuff, and you some of it isn't going to be good, and that's okay. And when you look at filmmakers, folks who you really love, and you look at their careers and their varied careers, there is definitely moments where you're like, that person made that thing. I think one of my favorite things is knowing that Shonda Rhimes wrote Crossroads, the Britney Spears movie, right? Is there's these ways in which you're everybody is just making, you learn and you kind of experiment. But as an artist, I don't know, I feel like you have to make, you're just really into that, and you kind of have to do it. I wrote Brown Girls because I had to write Brown Girls, right? It wasn't a thing of thinking about, well, is Hollywood going to buy it? Is HBO going to be interested in it? That was not a thing I cared about. It was not a thing that was even on my radar. When I wrote Brown Girls, I didn't even know if I could make it. It was a thing that I just wrote on my computer and thought that maybe, could be, I could dream about maybe being real one day. But in my wildest dreams, I don't think I expected what happened with Brown Girls to have happened.
The funny thing is that, we have this massive, I talked earlier about this, we have this massive age difference between you and us, okay? But why is it that everything you say is directly out of our playbook? Mm-hmm. Because what did she just say? She's like, experience. We're always talking about experience. This is what young people need to hear. You have to work again and again and again and again and again. And some will be, and if you're lucky, you'll get a success. Mm-hmm. That's the key. It's experience.
I think that I've just failed so many times in my own artistic career, right? And I've been rejected so many times, and it's a thing. And every time, you're on your ass, when that happens, you're just on the floor and you don't know what's happening. but that's just what it is that's a part of it. And like what I think is like when you are down for the count, what is the thing that gets you up again, right? Like when you are like those days that you have been knocked down and you feel so low, like what gets you to the table the next day, right? Like that's the feeling of why you do the work that you do. And so you know, and I think that there's a way that like folks only see success, right? So folks will see Brown Girls and they see the success of that and they're like, wow, this is amazing. Like that you made something and it did this thing. And, you know, and they don't see the amount of failures that happen for Brown Girls. They don't see me and Sam, you know, on the phone with each other crying like really late into the night and being really, really stressed. They don't see all of that. And that's okay. Like, you know, nobody needs to, but I think that, but I think to like tell the narrative of the positivity of everything without complicating the ways that, you know, it was a real struggle to do what we did from a financial standpoint, from pretty much anything. And it was just really me and Sam pulling our stuff together. That's a real kind of important thing.
I really
you know?
love what you just said, because you need to push through failure to get to success. That, you said, people don't know all the troubles that you've had.
Imagine if at every single moment of your artistic career, every door opened easily, like without you fighting for it. You would, I don't think you would be as good of an artist. Like, I think that there's kind of a way where when you're actually rejected, there's the moments of, you have to justify to yourself why you keep showing up and why you keep writing the way you do when you could write a different way or when you could make a different way, you know? And that to me is like where artistic integrity comes from, right? Because that's when you start to say, this is what I'm not going to compromise on. And this is what makes me who I am. And this is what makes my art the way it is. And I don't give a fuck if anybody cares or wants it or not. You know, the amount of times I cannot tell you before Brown Girls went that people pulled me aside and they told me that I needed to put white people in the series because they were like, well, networks won't care. They won't buy your show if you don't have white people in it. And I was like, I do not care about this. Like, and I do not care about networks buying this. And that's not an anti-white statement. What it is I wanted to center people of color and I wanted to center people who don't get that opportunity. And I wanted to center creatives who are often overlooked, like women and queer people and people of color who just don't get the chance to sit at the table, you know? And so to me, what I was doing was I was saying, this is what I want to do. And if that means that people don't want me or want my work or want to watch it, then that's okay. You know, how many times do I watch things that are made by all white productions and nobody questions that, you know? How many times is that just the default norm? You know, if we had gone a different route and if we had been like, well, we're pitching it first, we're pitching it to production companies, and the production companies were like, well, the only way we would sign on or the only way we would give you money is if you did this, that might have changed what the show was, you know? And so what we did was we didn't go that way, and we made it a very indie production with no real like hope. Like, you know, when Sam and I first talked about what is success, we did before we even got into the project, we said, what does success look like? You know, and what Sam's answer was she was like, as my first time directing something that is not mine, success looks like to me is that we make a product and Fatih is very happy with it, and that you as the writer feel very fulfilled by it. And to me, I was like, success looks like a group of my friends like watching this and feeling really, really moved by it and feeling like they see themselves and laughing. That was what success looked like. To us, like anything else beyond that was just beyond that. You know, we had no hope of making this money back or of whatever. That was not what we thought, you know, and I think that was a really important thing, is at this dawn of every project, you need to answer those questions of what does success look like.
I think a great lesson here to our audience is that, well, first of all, because your show was good and you used the internet, you were able to backdoor this whole thing, and you're sort of, you know, at that spot, you know, with HBO noticing it. You know?
I mean, I'm going to
use the internet.
Of course, but I'm going to disagree with you again, Fatima, in that think your show is incredibly relevant, incredibly at the exact right moment. Now, if you'd have done this 2 years ago, I would have said, I could see how somebody's saying maybe you should put a white person there. I don't know.
We did do it 2 years ago. Brown Girls was written in 2015, and we were having these, we started pre-production in 2016. So,
Okay.
And so
Okay.
the landscape was actually very different. And I know that that's just 2 years, but it was. And then we put out our show in 2017. And I think that our show was part of that wave of people who were like, oh, like we were part of the wave that was making people realize that content of color and queer content was a thing that people wanted, but that we were part of that. That was the kind of moment in which that wasn't something that was in the national discourse before really, like at the fall of 2017, and we premiered in February of 2017, and of course, like there are people who've been saying this forever, right? There's like creators of color, white creators, queer creators, everybody who's been like, this is not reflective of the world that we live in, and we are championing, and we want to champion stories of color. But a lot of the kind of waves of really, really popular creative content didn't, like, Insecure and Moonlight and Atlanta, that stuff didn't come out until, the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And that's exactly when we came out. So
Yeah, right place, right time.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the landscapes of things shifting, like it's wild. Me and my friends were just joking about this, but Black Panther came out at the top of this year, Black Panther did a lot to change the culture of cinema and to just change the culture of life. Like, the way that people kind of will do Wakandan salutes to each other and things like that. Like, but that came out this calendar year, a lot of the things that we're talking about relative wins, recently, they're very recent, and they're shifting and they're doing a lot, but they're very recent. And so that kind of pressure that marginalized creators face is really intense, because what you get, you kind of get it from all sides. Even with all me and Sam have done, like I'll go into, meetings in Hollywood now, and a lot of times I can tell people still don't think I'm an untested, unvetted writer, and they're like, and they're waiting to see the next thing I do before they want to work with me, or anything, and it's a thing where I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like there's still so much hesitation, towards creators of color, even when they've proven themselves. And that's something that
I got to interrupt you on that, because I think the issue isn't that I'm going to be Layla right now. That is not a color issue. That is a money issue.
I'm going to push back on that, because it's not just that, I've spent 29 years about to be 29 years being who I am and living in my body. And you can tell, like, there's microaggressions around it, right? It's not just a money thing. It's not them saying, oh, we don't have the money, whatever. You're an indie creator. That's not what it is, because it's specific things that people will say in regards to race before they, or how they talk about race. Before.
That may be.
I mean, it's not that it may be. It is.
Well, but if I were a studio banking on you and saying, okay, I'm going to put up, $8 million, $10 million to create a series, and I have a writer, no matter who you are, that is not, a proven television writer, and I have to answer to people, I'm going to be a little nervous, because, there's a lot of money riding on this,
But that's not just it is. That's not the only opportunities, right? So what you're also talking about is like the ways that folks talk to you about being in a writer's room, or the way that folks talk to you about like episodic directing if you're a director, right? There's kind of ways in which even in that. So it's not just about, oh, you're creating and here's $8 million. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is even the bare minimum of getting into the door is sometimes the hesitancy around that, despite having been indie creators who create. And also it's a thing of the amount of effort it takes to be an indie creator and to make something when you don't have real money backing you is a huge thing. And while there's leaps and bounds, like there's just different worlds of going from indie to network and going from indie to a more commercial studio, like when you prove yourself in the indie world and you prove yourself kind of like without having any resources and really doing something, that's something that people should take seriously. And what I find is that not enough, right? And this isn't just me and Sam, but this is folks that I see who make indie creators of color who make movies that do really well in the film festival circuit, and then, struggle to get their first episodic directing TV gig, on a
yeah,
it's X amount of seasons or whatever, right? And have proven that they can run a set, and that they can run a set with a scrappy budget, and or even to get into a lab, even to get into like something that's even more basic than that. There's kind of ways that you see the barriers when you're really working, and you see the way that people talk to you when you're a woman or a person of color or a queer person. You can feel it, and I don't know how to say that other than to keep saying that. And that's not the only things, right? Like, yes, there's the real nerves about money, and about you being an indie creator moving to network, and about all of that stuff, and about that's all real and important. But there is a way that I think, even with the changes in representation in film and Hollywood, that's not always reflected, behind the scenes.
But I just want you to understand, I don't disagree with you, and I also don't want to get beaten up by the whole internet community, but you do need to realize that proving something once, twice is one thing when you're dealing with people that are responsible for large sums of money.
Because it's a business.
Because it is a business. This is the film business, and you created something that's incredibly marketable. They see that, but they're still nervous. There's a lot of money riding on it. It's not like they're getting Aaron Sorkin to where they're going to know. And even when they get Aaron Sorkin, it's not a guarantee.
No,
like you had said earlier, there is a lot of failures to get to successes, and the Hollywood business model is based on, I make 15 things and 2 of them may be decent, and I'm banking on that. So it's like they're very nervous and worried about money. And again, I can't speak to your project, but for HBO, to me, they're probably looking to pick up a bigger catalog of products, take some risks without an enormous sum of money. I'm assuming that they're not throwing an enormous sum of money, but they're being able to widen their catalog and open up their audience, which is what Netflix is doing too. They're also an enormous amount of content, but they're not throwing ginormous amounts of money at every single properties that they're working on. And again, this is a business. So I don't want to be beaten up.
I mean, I think that all of these things can exist at the same time, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that it can exist that you need to fail to get things done, right? I think it's like you need to, not everything that you make is going to be good, right? Like, I think even if you've proven yourself, right? I think that it can exist too that there's still a tremendous amount of barriers for artists of color, queer artists, and women artists.
Fair
right?
enough. I want to shift to one other thing, and then I know Rachel probably has a comment, is about your characters. Well, when I read through all of those quotes, from various articles, the one that I just love is that HBO dumps girls for brown girls. You gotta love that, okay? That is beautiful. But what I never liked about Girls was that they portrayed millennials, I guess I'm gonna say, as very backstabbing, self-serving. When their characters they were very unlikable, and one of them would be like expressing a victory that they had, and the other ones are just like, well, I can't be bothered with that. I have this going on in my life. And I found that maybe one of the reasons why we like the connection between Patricia and Layla is that they are not backstabbing, that they're truly friendly to each other, and you can tell that they love each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that love was a really guiding force of the entire series. Like, it was really important to me because I think what I saw was in a lot of, and I've never seen Girls in full transparency, but I think that what I've seen in a lot of film content is when there's relationships between women in particular, they're usually at each other's throats, right? And that's compounded when it's women of color. There's never real moments of women of color from two different racial backgrounds, like loving each other. You know, they're always kind of seen in competition. And it was really important to me because that's what makes up my community and my friend groups, is all of this kind of like real love that people have for each other. And despite like our messiness, and that's kind of why they co-sign each other's bullshit all the time, right? Which is why like they're like out here doing things that they shouldn't be doing and like ramping each other up, because that's what friendship and love is like when you know your friend is wrong and you still let them do the thing that they do anyway. You know, and when you call them out, like they're both of those exist. And so to me, it was just really, really important to kind of center the series around love and the characters around love, but also like love in many ways, like love to each other, love to Chicago. You know, it was really important to me that we create something, you know, a real like sense of love and pride for how we feel about Chicago. And I think that, and when Chicago is so often depicted so negatively in media, and so you know, that was really the mission with the web series, was to really center love in its many capacities.
I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. Okay, you've never seen Girls?
I haven't.
Come on.
I'm so honest. By the time that it kind of came on my radar, a lot of folks were just, they were just like, oh yeah, it's cool, but whatever. And it wasn't kind of something that I just watch. There's so much content, and it just wasn't something I watched. And that's no shade to them. You know, I don't think, I'm not trying to be that way to them at all. I think that they have made it, from what I've heard, you know, an amazing show that does a lot for representation for a lot of people. It just wasn't something that I had seen.
We're probably about ready to wrap up, so I just sort of wanted to ask a question, because we had a little bit of back and forth in the comments earlier about the title, and I just wanted to sort of know where in your process the title came, because feels a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's also very direct, and so maybe that could be a good way to sort of get some final thoughts in from you, Fatemia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the title just came because the show was about it's about two brown girls, right? And so I was like, oh, this is what it is. And when I can't kind of I can't overemphasize the mentality that we were in when I wrote this and when I was creating it. We weren't thinking about Hollywood. We weren't thinking about all of this stuff. And because I don't watch Girls and it's not a reference point, it wasn't a referring back to that, you know? And so it wasn't until the show came out and we started being compared to Girls that I was like, oh, like people are reading it as that kind of a title, or it's like people think that I'm being shady towards girls, and I'm totally not, like, at all. The title of Brown Girls was never, ever, ever meant to be a dig on them, but it just was a thing that was a reference point to what I felt when me and my friends talk. We're like, yeah, we're brown girls, we're brown women, it was just a thing that we said to each other, and so it just felt like a really, really natural kind of fit for that web series.
And I didn't in any way mean to compare your show to Girls, because they are two totally different shows, and that is obvious. So,
comparisons happen all the time, and that's fine, right? Like, you can say, like, this reminds me of this. That's not, they're never, it's never a bad thing to be in dialogue with other art, right? That's not what it is. But I think that what we saw in the media was a lot of people putting us at each other's throats with them. And in the spirit of what Brown Girls is and the love that we had for that show, like, we're never trying to be at odds with another woman created thing. Like, you know, it's not like we're trying to be like, this, you know, that's just not our ethos, is that. And so it was not a thing that was meant to be a dig at them at all. You know, it was a thing that was created separately.
Okay, well, your show has a lot more love, and that's what I like. So, Rachel, why don't you wrap us out?
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us. It's been really fun. It's been really fun talking to you in the comments. And a big thank you to ICANN, who provide all of the lighting to our show, and our sponsor, Rode Mics. Enjoy your week. We'll see you next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Bye.